it seems like every week someone tries to justify their wrong actions by claiming the stand your ground law. And it drives me nuts because they're perverting something that could be a good thing. Let me make a couple things clear. I'm a gun owner. I have a concealed weapon permit. I support the Second Amendment. I believe we have the right to defend ourselves in our homes and in public. I believe in the concept of the stand your ground law, where you have a right to defend yourself with deadly force if you are in danger of physical bodily harm or death or somebody else in defense of others. I believe in that. But just this week, we had another example of someone who did the wrong thing and is claiming stand your ground, or the state's claiming it, in Chickamauga, Georgia, earlier this week. Mr. Jim Hendricks, no, Joe Hendricks, not Jimi Hendrix. Joe Hendricks and his wife were asleep in their bed. About 4 o'clock in the morning, doorbell was rang, the doorknob was jiggled. It awoke Mr. and Mrs. Hendricks, and they began responsibly. Honey, call the police. So Mrs. Hendricks called the police. And Joe Hendricks, he got his firearm to be able to protect his wife and himself. Great. Sounds like a responsible thing to do. Then he went downstairs to see what was going on, or out of his bedroom. I shouldn't say downstairs, I don't know for sure. By the time he got to the front door, nobody was knocking or ringing the doorbell. So he checked around the front and backyards to see if someone was trying to get in a back door or a window, and that also is responsible. And then he saw someone in the backyard. He saw a silhouette in the backyard. And this is where he started being, in my opinion, less than responsible. He stepped into the backyard. He saw a shadowy figure. He had his firearm. He gave some verbal commands to stop. And the shadowy figure apparently did not stop. And Joe Hendricks shot 2 or 3 shots into the chest of a 72-year-old Alzheimer's sufferer by the name of Ronald Westbrook, who apparently was suffering from the elements and a little Alzheimer's. And apparently Mr. Westbrook had lived in the neighborhood and probably was drawn by the fact that the only porch light that was on was of Mr. Hendricks. Mr. Hendricks shot and killed an unarmed person. Stand your ground. It was his property. He had the right to protect himself from a threat. Maybe we need to tighten the rules a little bit. Maybe more specific. Mr. Hendricks was in his home in relative safety. He was there. Doors locked. Firearm at the ready. Police on the phone. And he left the relative safety of his home to go pursue someone who he didn't know who the person was, how the person was armed. Mr. Hendricks could have stepped out in the backyard, and as he's yelling his commands, could have got a shotgun blast to the face. He didn't, because it was a 72-year-old man who had Alzheimer's and didn't know where he was. You can't use stand your ground here. There was no threat. Sorry, folks. Now some are saying, well, he didn't know what it was and there was a threat. No, folks, there wasn't a threat. He was fine in his house. Now, I know all the reports are that Mr. Hendricks is tore up about this. He is beside himself that he killed an innocent person. And I feel bad for him in that respect. But I also believe that he shouldn't just, I don't have any prosecution because I was protecting myself, because there was no threat. And there's a theme going on in the last few months or year. This incident happened just a couple weeks after a woman who was in a car accident. Yes, she was drunk or high or whatever, ringing on a doorknob, knocking on a door, ringing a handle, and was shot in the face with a shotgun and killed, which came a few weeks after a young man driving his car was shot in the head and killed by a man who perceived a threat, came out of his house after getting his children secured, stood in his front yard while the cars came by, and possibly two of them may have shot out toward him, but he shot a third car. And all of these things, this last incident is in South Carolina, and a judge just ruled recently he doesn't stand in, he doesn't have to have any charges against him. He has no stand against anything. You can't prosecute him because of stand your ground. The prosecutor has appealed this to the state Supreme Court, who I believe and I hope and pray will say, no, this is not stand your ground. The whole concept, besides stand your ground, is if you are faced with a threat of death or bodily injury, that you could protect yourself. Mr. Hendricks was in his home. There was no threat. That was annoyance. Ringing, knocking on a door. Yes, call the cops, get your gun, secure your perimeter. There's no need to go outside. The other case, it's not I feel threatened. It's if you're actually in a threat. I support the stand your ground law, but they're being misused. And my call right now is either stop allowing them to be misused, judges, or legislature, get rid of it. Now, I know you're like, oh, no, I have a right to protect myself, and I agree. But I also agree it has to be done smart. And if there's a dead body on the ground, then there has to be an investigation, and there should be, in most cases, a court case. Look, in the case where, in Colombia, where the man shot the kid in the car, the investigation started, but then it ended because they're not having a trial. We don't know all the details. Same case with this one. In this one here in Georgia, if this is continued to allow to be stand your ground, there is nothing that can happen to that gentleman for shooting somebody who was unarmed. I know he didn't know that, but who posed no actual threat to the man. Responsible gun owners know that you're supposed to de-escalate a situation. You're supposed to avoid a tragic situation. A responsible gun owner, in my opinion, in Mr. Hendricks' place, would have done the first two things he did. Call the police. Keep them on the line as you're checking the perimeter inside of your house to make sure nothing's happened. Look out the window. You see a shadowy figure in the backyard. You don't have to go out and confront that figure. The police are on their way. Well, I need to protect myself. Well, you are protected because you're in your house. I'm sorry, folks. Unless the stand your ground law is going to be used responsibly, it should be gone. So that's your choices. Convince the judges, convince the prosecutors that we're going to use stand your ground properly. There actually has to be a real threat. That I'm in imminent danger. Otherwise, it's a tragic event. And Mr. Hendricks could use, I'm sorry, I thought I was defending myself, but in this case, I think it was negligence. Negligent homicide. I don't know what the exact legal term would be, but this has to stop. I know I have some friends, and this is why I say this, because I believe in the concept. But there's a lot of people out there who see these misuses of the stand your ground law and say that's the problem. You shouldn't have a stand your ground law. You should have to get away. You should have to call the police. You shouldn't be able to defend yourself. And they're wrong on that. But as long as people keep misusing this, it adds fuel to their fire. So I call on responsible gun owners, NRA members, gun stores, to get out and tell the public that's wrong. You don't go tracking somebody down. You don't go follow somebody. You don't leave the relative safety of where you are and go. Let me just pause at one idea here. Mr. Hendricks left his house, which meant his wife was alone in her home. If there had been more than one person, or if the person Mr. Hendricks saw wasn't the guy trying to get into the house, he just left his wife undefended, which is one of his responsibilities. Unless she was packing heat too. There's no evidence of that. All right, folks, I, I can't stress this enough. If you're pro stand your ground law, if you're a responsible gun owner, you should be out in the public saying this is wrong. You shouldn't do this. And you should be contacting anybody you can to get them to not allow this to be used this way. All right, you can hear stuff like this and more on Another Voice with Eric and Friends, which you can find our podcasts on canIGetAWordIn.com, usually on Monday evenings. You can go to iTunes, subscribe to us at Another Voice with Eric and Friends. You can go to Facebook at Another Voice with Eric and Friends. This video, you might be watching it on YouTube at Be Another Voice. And if you are, put some comments down here. I'd love to hear what you have to say. Until next time, get out in your community and make a difference.